Hello fellow 3D enthusiasts, my name's Ian, and today we're going to be talking about how you can track shots in the dark. Like, is this even possible? Is this how you do it? No, just don't waste your time, alright? Okay, so, camera tracking in the dark, don't do it. Today, I'm going to be sharing a technique that will help you to get shots that look like they were filmed in the dark, and that have CG elements in them. But with this technique, you don't have to do any camera tracking in the dark. So this is going to take a little bit of work, but here's the basics of the technique. Instead of filming video, what we're going to do is take some pictures with a long exposure, and you can take these at night, so you can have the lighting and the stars and all that. But then what we're going to do after we take these photos is reconstruct the scene in 3D, drop in our CG element, and then add some camera motion that is completely realistic on top of that to make it look like it was all done in one shot in the dark. And of course, if you want to go over the top a little bit, you can. I'm not going to show that in this tutorial, but it's always an option since this scene is completely 3D. So after you've taken all the pictures you need, in Blender, we're just going to import those images as planes. And in my scene, I only used a couple of images, but there's nothing holding you back from taking a whole bunch of pictures. Then just go ahead and line those up roughly. There's going to be a tiny bit of a seam, but it's not a huge issue. It won't be very noticeable in the end. Once we have those two images lined up, I'm going to hop into edit mode on the bottom image with tab. And in the front view, I'm just going to hit K and then cut a line across the whole image. And this is just going to match the foliage line, where it turns from grass into bushes. With the knife tool, once you click in the two places you want to cut, you can hit enter to make that work. And you've got your cut. I'm going to hit the number 2 up above my keyboard to go into the edge select mode. And then just drag that lower edge out so that the grass ends up being a little bit more like the ground. Then with that middle edge selected, I'm just going to hit Ctrl B and scroll up on my middle mouse button. And back in object mode, we can right click and hit Shade Smooth to soften stuff up even more. Nice. Now, right now we're in Eevee, so I'm going to switch that to be cycles. And I'm also going to delete this point lamp up here. Let's scale this up a little bit. If you look in the shading tab, you'll realize our materials right now are using a principled shader. So let's switch this to be emission. I'm going to hit Shift S, shader, and emission. And let's just do that to the other material as well. Now if we look in the rendered view, you can see that the values on these two images are a tiny bit different and the bottom one is a little brighter. So what I'm going to do is go Shift A, color, and RGB curves, and I'm just going to drag this little curve down so that it's a bit darker. And there's our background pretty much done. Now I'm going to hit number pad 1 to go into front view, and Control Alt and 0 on the number pad to match the camera up with our current view. And now I'm just going to select the camera, go into the camera properties, zoom that in a bit, and then drag it backwards. In a different blend file, I'm just going to select a character that I animated, go Control C with everything selected, and then back in this original scene, I'm going to go Control V and paste it in there. Let's just take a second to realign this guy so that he matches up with where we want him to be. Then let's hop into the Render Properties tab and check Motion Blur, and also use the Color Management dropdown to set Filmic to Standard. And then along the top, let's just add in a new Motion Tracking tab. I'm going to open this basic video that I took, and this is going to be our camera motion. You'll notice that it doesn't actually have any location change, it's just rotation change. There's a panel on the side here that you can activate with N, and I'm just going to change the frame start value so that it uses the part of the clip that I'd like. If I play this back, you can see it ends a little bit soon, so I'm going down to playback to reset the end frame, and that just goes to wherever your timeline cursor is. And now, since there's no location data on this clip, I'm just going to do a tripod track, which you only need about 4 trackers for, so this isn't going to be a huge pain, which is nice. Once you have the 4 tracks done, I'm going to go into the Solve panel, check Tripod, and then Solve Camera Motion. Then if we hop back into the Layout tab, we can go to our Camera Constraints tab, and add a Camera Solver constraint. Nice, check out that shaky cam. This is a quick addition to say if you want, you can actually animate the influence of the camera solver, so you can go from one point where there's no influence and it's not a shaky cam by hitting I at that point on the timeline, and then go to a different point on the timeline, hit I again, that'll add in a keyframe, and you've got different shakiness at different points in time. In the camera view, with the camera selected, let's hit G and that middle mouse button, and we can just scooch it forward so that the background is always in camera at all times. This little button down here is for auto keyframes. It's super useful. So whenever you grab something, like the camera for example, like I'm doing right here, it'll add a keyframe at that position on the timeline at that point in time. And there you go. Hey, I'm going to move the camera up. I'm sure there's some fancy filmmaking term for that, but I didn't go to film school, so what are you going to do about it? And on this last keyframe here, I'm going to rotate it up ever so slightly just to get the siren head in frame. Alright, this guy is way too dark right now, so if we go into the cha-cha-cha world settings, now if we turn up the color here, the siren head gets brighter. There you go. Isn't that just a marvel of modern technology right there? If you match up the dark values as best you can, that's probably something that'll help it it'll look better then. Nice. Okay, so if we go back into our render settings, if we go under sampling and check adaptive sampling, that'll make things a lot faster. Not even joking, this is an amazing feature. Okay, let's go to the compositing tab. Use nodes. Get rid of that thing. Who needs that? And to get rid of the tab on the side, and control space to make it really big. When you get the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, Control-Shift-Click on the Render Layers node. That'll drop in the little viewer node boy. If you want to clean this up, you can go Shift and right-click and drag across those two lines. That'll kind of match them up. Okay, let's go Shift-A and Distort and Lens Distortion. On that bottom value there, let's drop in a 0.02-ish, I'd say. That'll give that wild lens effect, makes it look realistic. Hey, don't overdo that though. Then let's go Shift-A, Color and Color Balance, and drop in this boy. Let's just make this middle value a little bit blue to make things look super cool. Alright, a couple more nodes. Let's go Shift-A, Filter and Sunbeams. Turn up the ray length a little bit, drop that into a Shift-A Color Mix node, and actually, after turning down the factor a little bit, let's change this to be an Add node. A little bit of this can go a long way, so make sure you don't overdo that. Now the super cool thing about this node is there's this little X here in the middle, and that's basically the position of the sun, and that's where all the sun rays will come from. Or maybe they're moonbeams, since this is nighttime, right? And since it's nighttime, this is a little bit bright here at the moment, so let's go Shift-A, Color, RGB Curves, and then drop that there at the end. And then we can just drop this curve down so that the contrast is a little bit high, the darks are a little bit darker, and things start to blend in a little bit better. And if we look closely here, you can see the CG element is a little bit too dark, so we could probably stand to turn up the background color a bit like we did before. But hey, it's kind of all fiddly stuff around. You know how that works. Now let's create a new folder to render out our image sequence to, and nice. Now obviously those feet look terrible because there are no contact shadows, and we could mess around with shadow catchers, but we could also just cover it all up with trees. Okay, so that was going to be the end of the tutorial, but I finished editing it, and it looked like this, which I just showed you, but it doesn't look like nighttime. And the biggest issue, I think, was probably how long I had the shutter open to get these two pictures here. If you look at the sky, that does not really communicate nighttime. So I think if I let it close a little bit sooner, rather than however long, it would have been a lot darker. And I think that would have helped us a lot here. Now it's daytime right now, so I can't go out and get more photos. What we're gonna do is just make lemonade with lemons. So there's a few little hacks that we can do to make our camera behave more like it would if it was nighttime. One of those hacks is to use depth of field. And a lot of the time at night, cameras have kind of a hard time auto-focusing on what they should be focusing on. So what we're going to do here is just kind of grab this empty and animate it around like crazy. And if we go into solid view and we just kind of watch this play back. Nice. Alright. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to check this auto keyframes button once more. And I'm going to grab this. Actually, if we go into wireframe, we can see the background here. And we want this thing basically to be going on here and on the background and all over the place in between. So as this is playing, I'm just going to grab it and go wee. Nice. That is the official definition of what I just did there, is wee. Okay, so I think this may actually help us quite a lot to get it looking realistic. And I'm sorry, I didn't explain this very well. So I've got the camera selected here, I've gone to the camera settings, and I've checked this depth of field box here, and for the focus object, I've just got this empty that I just moved around like crazy, and then down in aperture, I've just turned the f-stop way down, and that just makes things more blurry the lower that value is. And from what I understand, at nighttime, cameras have to have their aperture way opened, and that makes them see better, and that makes things more blurry. That's what I understand. I don't know. I'm not a camera guy, but if we take a look at this, things are getting blurry and crazy, and that's what happens at night. And if you think about actually trying to record a video at night of this and then trying to track it, that is why this technique is so powerful. Okay, so a couple more techniques. one more technique. In compositing, if we just give this a quick render, you can see what I have here is a little bit crazier, and that is because right here at the start, instead of having it all colorful like this, I've just ran it through a color ramp and then a mix node, so there's a little bit of color still there. But what this does is it really desaturates it, and at nighttime, I don't know about cameras, but human eyes aren't really able to see color at nighttime. And so I've just desaturated that a little bit, and we've got our sunbeams still here. I've got that adding in. I don't know why I have sunbeams at night, but once that happens, it goes through the color balance, and that's got a really crazy blue tint to it. Then once again, we got our lens distortion and our RGB curves, and that just really cranks down the values of everything. And if we take a look at this, it looks a lot more like it's nighttime. So yeah, that is my that's my final rant there. Okay, wrapping it up here. If you found this useful and you'd like to see more tutorials like this, there's a link in the description that says free hydraulic kit bash elements. And when you click this, it'll add you to my email list, and I'll just make sure that the first thing I send you are a pack of hydraulic kit bash elements made for Blender. And then in the future, whenever I upload a tutorial, I just mail out to that list so that you can keep up to date. But other than that, I hope you have an excellent day. I'll catch you next week, and cheers!